Welcome everyone to this month's NOSA Foundation webinar. And today we're going to be talking about resilience and ultimately how we can gain strategies of resilience in our life so that we can overcome every circumstance that we face. I know for myself, and I know you all can identify, as we face difficult circumstances all the time. In fact, a lot of times it comes on a day-to-day basis, and in some cases, even moment to moment. And I know for myself, sometimes if I don't have the strategies and the tools in place, I can get quite overcome easily. And I want to share with you guys some tools and strategies today of what has worked for me and what has worked for Connie, and what is just really fundamental principles of resilience. Let's start with what the definition of resilience is. It's the capacity of a person to maintain their core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. And this isn't a definition that you'll find in a dictionary. This is like a personal definition from someone we found online. And unfortunately, it had no name attached to it. So no one's claiming ownership over this, but it just really spoke to both Connie and I about what resilience is in the core level, right? Because we all experience difficulty, and what makes one person able to overcome easier, and it's resilience. And what is resilience? Well, it's our ability to maintain who we truly are, no matter what's going on around us. And I think that is, truly the most important thing to consider when facing difficulty is this going to change fundamentally who I am? Am I going to allow this to take me down? Am I going to allow this to, even erode some of the faith or some of the, the strengths that I've already built within myself, right? Because a lot of times we can overcome in many areas, and then we'll find that we experience something that we maybe have never experienced before. And we find that it sometimes chips away at some of the great growth that we've already experienced in our life. And so true resilience is just our capacity to maintain that core purpose and integrity in our life. Now, this one is actually from the dictionary. The dictionary definition is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, and it's a form of toughness. And I think this is the definition that most of us most closely relate to or understand. It's the one that we've come to know as, what resilience really is. And this is what we want to share with you today. So this is my main question. Why do some people experience the same circumstances but have different outcomes? Some operate with resilience when others never recover from them. And I know even for myself, I seem to have the ability to bounce back easier from certain circumstances than others. And, I noticed in my track record that the times I'm able to bounce back, I've used specific strategies in my life. And the times that I haven't, I've allowed myself to, be taken down or to be oppressed or even weighed down by the circumstances that I am in. And so today we just want to show you what is the difference? What makes one person resilient over another, or what makes us more resilient in one moment versus another moment? And what I've found is that resilience really just comes down to a choice. And it's a choice in the outcome of my story and your story. And the thing is, no matter what we face and no matter what we go through, we get to choose how the story ends. We get to choose whether we allow it to stop us in our tracks or whether we're going to push through and see it to the end, if we're going to see ourselves through the problem and to the other side. And it's for this reason that I think that this is a really important topic. And I didn't even realize in my own life how much my own personal resilience impacted others. And it wasn't until I was 19 years old and I was working at a youth camp. And, whatever I do, I put my whole heart and soul into it. And I had all these beautiful young women as campers that summer. And I literally just poured my heart and soul into them. And a few of them were going through some significantly difficult challenges. And I just spoke truth to them. I spoke hope to them. I gave them inspiration to believe for something better for their life and to believe that this wasn't the end of their story. And I didn't realize how much of an impact I made in their life until later that fall, when I got a phone call from the Medicine Hat Resiliency Committee, and they wanted me to come to Medicine Hat to the City Hall to receive an award for resiliency. And what had happened was these girls were asked in their school, what is one person who has made a significant impact in your life? And we want you to write about them. And these two girls wrote about me, and they wrote about my impact on their life. And what I hadn't realized was that my simple act of just, walking through my own experience with them and sharing how I had overcome in the past and how, I was able to look past circumstances and see the hope that lies beyond the problem. And I imparted that into them, that it sparked something in them. And so I just want to reiterate this. Resilience is really a choice in the outcome of your story. So you get to choose. No matter where you are right now, no matter what you're going through, you get to define how it ends. You get to define what the rest of the story will look like. And that's the coolest part about resilience, is that whatever's happening right now isn't the end of the story. It might feel like it in some ways, but it's not. And so here we go for some encouragement. This is actually a quote from me that I want to share today. And I think this is also one misconception that sometimes we have. We think, oh, well, that person is resilient, but not me. Right? You see some people that have an ability to overcome quickly and overcome repeatedly, and maybe you struggle, and maybe you find it very difficult to do that. But I want to challenge you with that mindset, because resilience is not something that only a select few have. It's something that God's designed and wired within all of us, and it only needs to be discovered. The layers peeled back to reveal the tenacious, courageous warrior that is within all of us. And so I hope that this inspires you to look within, because you have what it takes. God's given us all that gift of resilience. And we're going to see that through all the scriptures we share today. Like, God has hardwired it in who we are to be resilient, to push past, to be perseverant. And it's only in our decisions and in our circumstances that we decide not to push through, that we fall into that pattern of not being resilient. So I want to go over some mindsets that could keep you stuck in a perspective of not being an overcomer or not operating in resilience. And these are some things that I have said over time or thought, and times I have heard others say. And I'm sure you all can even add to the list things that aren't even on here. But I'm just going to read off, excuse me. I'm just going to read them off. So the first one, there is no hope for me or my circumstances anymore. Oftentimes when we get to this point, we've been in this circumstance for so long that we can't see our way out. And we've basically lost hope. Another one is, why do I even try? Nothing ever works out anyways. Another one, I can't live without them in my life. I've heard this one a lot. When you have someone significant in your life and you lose them, whether it be suddenly, unexpectedly, or even if you knew that they were passing, but their absence in your life, sometimes we think that we can't go on without them. And that kind of mindset isn't going to be beneficial to us moving forward. Another mindset we might have is, I'm a failure, I'll never succeed. And this one often comes in the face of, If you've tried many different things and you seem to fail a lot, or you seem to not be able to succeed in the things that you try to do, this would be a common mindset for you to, adopt, where you feel like, you're never going to succeed. So why even try? You just feel like you're a failure. Another one could be, I will never recover from this. This could be from trauma. This could be from significant life change. Anything that has happened that has, even changed the trajectory of your life. Sometimes we think, how will I ever recover from this? It's very difficult sometimes to see past what's happening right now in the here and now. Another one is, I'm not good enough. This one can rear its ugly head, especially if we're surrounded by people who, seem to have it all or seem to find success no matter what they do. You can look to them and compare yourself and think, you know what, you'll never measure up. But all of these mindsets are ones that are going to keep you bound and keep you stuck where you are. And it's not going to allow for you to move through your problem and into success. And another one is, life is too hard. How many times have we said this? This is just too hard. I can't handle this. I can't do this. These words, I can't, I won't, I'm not enough. Like, all of these negative words, these are like literally us speaking death over our lives. And I think it's important that we be mindful of the thoughts that we're having and the words that we're speaking. So I just wanted to go over maybe a few areas of resilience will be required. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some areas where I've personally had to overcome, and maybe you can relate with some of them. I've had to be resilient in all of these areas. Starting something new, you need to push past, because you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes that can intimidate you and make you hold back. In relationships, that could be with friendships, family, marriages, children, or even when you're trying to change poor habits. This has come in the face of my own challenges when I'm trying to change negative things that have been in my life for a long time that have not served me. It's hard to push past those things. It's hard to make those changes, and resilience will be required. Overcoming trauma, resilience will be required. And in that regard, a lot of times it requires us to be willing, to be courageous and brave, to allow God to take us back there so he can bring us healing. Grief can come in many different forms. It can be grief of a death of a loved one, grief of a loss of some, part of your life, even maybe your job. Grief can come in many different ways, and it will require you to be resilient to get through it. Another one is academic or learning. I know when I was going to university, I had to persevere. I had to be resilient. I had to push past my perceived limits and push towards something that I had never done before. Another area is when we feel failure or defeated. Devastating losses is another one. And financial hardships is a huge one for me and my family. Like and many of you know this about me, but when I married my husband, he was in a significant amount of debt, and we've been slowly paying it off. But that means there's been financial hardships, and we have had to be resilient. We have had to push through. Every time we've been knocked down, we've had to get back up. And so this is a significant area where I think many of us face the opportunity of developing resilience in our life. This next one I haven't personally had the personally experienced, but I know many people who have. It's when you basically lost everything through bankruptcy or foreclosure. That is such a devastating loss. And for you to, push through that and to believe that, you could start over again, and you could still have a successful life, and you could still have a fulfilling life after a significant loss like that, could be very difficult. And another one, which in many cases is very difficult to get through, is the death of a loved one. Someone you really, truly cared about, and in their absence, it's difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I just want to share with you 2 Corinthians 4:8-9. We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but we're never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. And in face of our trials and our troubles, I think this is a scripture to hold so dear to ourselves. And I would encourage even all of you to, write it on some kind of card or poster board or something and put it up so you can see this. And especially in the times where you're struggling, the times when you need to persevere, the times where, there's no time for you to, just choose to give up. And I think that if we really take God at his word, that's really never the option, because he's always calling us to be pursuing more. He's always calling us to be growing and healing and moving through the problems that we find in this life. Because he never said we won't have problems. He's acknowledged the fact that we live in a world that's going to have problems. We're going to face difficult circumstances, but he's also given us the tools of what to do, how to overcome, and how to seek him in those times. Hey, Connie, you can take over from here.
I've been learning a lot about resilience over time. And so I just wanted to share some of the lessons that I've learned, and hopefully they'll help you too. God teaches us resilience, and he does that through his word. So there's so many scriptures that show us how to be resilient. And there was not enough time tonight to go over them all. That's how many there are. And there's just so many different aspects, but I'm going to touch on a few. The first one I'm going to touch on is trust. The first thing in my trust category is we need to trust God. And so when we're facing difficult times, if we don't truly trust God, then we're going to have a hard time allowing him to actually help us in that situation. And we're going to try to do it on our own. And I don't know about you, but when I've tried to do it on my own, I rarely succeed. But when I've trusted God with things, then I find more success. I think the hardest time for me when it came to trusting God was probably when we tried to adopt my husband's niece. It failed, and we felt that God had led us down that road. And so we were devastated when it didn't succeed. And I wanted to know why it didn't succeed. And God's only response was, do you trust me? Can you trust me in this if I don't tell you why? And I actually had to think about that. That challenged me to really, really, really think about that. Can I trust God with everything, even if I don't understand, even if I don't know why, even if I can't figure it out? And in that moment, I was like, yes, I can. Because I remembered all the times that I had trusted him and all the times he came through for me. And so I did exactly that. And through that, it really showed me that I don't need to know. I'm not God. I don't understand his ways. I don't even understand most of the thoughts that he has towards me, let alone anything else. And so I have to trust him. I have to trust that whatever I'm going through has a bigger purpose than what I can see. And he never abandons us. We only need to invite him in. And we have to invite him in because he doesn't force his way into situations. We have to invite him. And that's something you need to remember in the midst of your crisis, in the midst of those times. You need to be able to invite him in. And it's not that he's not there when we don't invite him in. He's there with us, but he can only be with us until we let him into the situation, let him move in the situation and do something about it. And we need to give him our troubles, our crisis, our storms, and trust that he'll bring us to the other side. And Jeremiah 29:11 has been like the verse that I always go to when it comes to this, because God's plan for us is good. And Jeremiah 29:11 talks about how his plan for us is good, not to harm us, but to give us a hope and a future. And so we need to hold on to that in those times, knowing that God's overall plan for us is good. We're heading in a good direction, even if that moment really is hard. It's not going to be that way forever, like Laura was saying. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about was gratitude or thankfulness. And being thankful in all situations help us to focus on the good and not the bad. And there's a couple of scripture references there that you can look up later. But recognizing how blessed we are helps us when we have hard times, because we know that that's not the end for us. And one of my favorite songs right now says, if it's not good, it's not done, right? Like, you're not done. God's not done with it then. Because once again, going back to Jeremiah 29:11, he has good for us. And that's not the only place in the Bible where it says that. It says that in multiple places. So God's plans for us are good. And so if it's not good, then there's still hope. There's still more to do. And then in those moments, I also think about all the things that have been good so far, all the things that God has blessed me with, all the things that he has helped me with. And like I said, in that moment in that car, that's what helped me to say, yeah, I can trust you, was because I remembered all those times. And that's what can help you keep moving forward, keep going. Because if I hadn't, I would have been stuck there in my pain, stuck there in my misery, stuck there not understanding why God would lead us down a road that was so painful. The third one I want to talk about is strength. So when we ask God for strength to face our trial, our storm, or our hardship, he comes through for us, and he gives us strength in our times of weakness. And he gives us the strength that we need in order to persevere. And all we need to do is ask. He says multiple times in the word that all we need to do is ask, and he will give it to us. And this strength will help us get through it. It may even allow us to help others through the same thing as well. And especially if you're going through something as a family, or you're going through something with a friend, or you're going through something with other people, if you ask God for strength, sometimes you can help carry them through it. So I think about when we lost my grandmother, I asked God for the strength to help my mom through that, because it was her losing her mother, and she was a mess. And so God gave me the strength to be able to be there for her and also be there for myself, which was really awesome. So never underestimate God's strength in your life. And then the next thing I wanted to discuss is community. We need to rely on each other, because we're not an island and we can't make it through these difficult times alone. Whether or not you have someone in your life already, you can gain people in your life, and it can be mentors, counselors, trusted friends. God and close family can all be helpful in overcoming these times. And the more support we have, the better chance we have at being able to come out of these times quicker and stronger than going in. And I think about it was about a month and a half ago, I had this huge fight with my husband, and I was a mess and I didn't know what to do. And so I was thinking about who I could talk to, who would be able to help me gain some perspective and get through this. And so I called Laura, and she was able to give me some very great advice. She prayed for me, and, God downloaded a few things to me to do as well. And I came out of that quite quickly compared to how it would have been if I hadn't reached out to someone. And ever since then, I've had those strategies in place so that I've actually been able to almost stop these arguments in their tracks, which has been amazing. So it's made me stronger in these situations. And honestly, I don't think I would be that strong if I didn't have that advice from Laura, and if I didn't reach out for her support, and if I didn't go to God seeking support. which leads me into the next thing. This is a scripture verse from Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9 to 12. And to me, this is the key to what I've been talking about. Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help, but someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm, but how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. And just this past weekend, a friend of mine was talking about this, and she actually had string. And so she actually pulled out string and was like, and it's like sewing thread, right? So it's not that thick. And she was like, so this is what happens when you pull one. And it ripped right away. And then she put two together, and then she tried to do it, and it was harder for her. And then she put three together, and she had to really reef on it before it would break. And these are just little tiny pieces of thread. And in here, it's talking about a cord. So it's like talking about rope, which is much stronger. And even in her little illustration, it was just so powerful to see how the difference between, and she had to pull on it for like a good 10 seconds. And so it's a huge difference in the strength you get when you have support. And when they're talking about the three braided cord, I always imagine it as a person, me, like, and God, right? That's the three cords, right? God is in the mix, because with him, like his strength with me, I'm so much stronger. And I'm going to pass it back to Laura now.
Thank you, Connie, for sharing that. That was amazing. So in preparation for this webinar today, I came across this quote, and I really, really wanted to share it today. It's from Neil L. Anderson, and he writes, "How do you remain steadfast and immovable during a trial of faith? You immerse yourself in the very thing that helped you build your core of faith." And the reason I wanted to bring this up today is because I think during our trials and during our difficult times and the circumstances that kind of really shake us, it's often our faith that takes the biggest hit. And what I mean by that is many times when we go through trials, we wonder, where was God in the midst of it all? You know, why did these things happen? Like, why couldn't God have avoided these things in my life? Why couldn't he have stopped these things? And sometimes when we face some of these very challenging things, it can actually really test our faith. And so I really wanted to bring up this point today that, you know, maybe you're even in that place right now where what the circumstances that you're going through have even, you know, challenged the foundation of your faith in God. And I would, and the saying tells us so clearly how we can overcome that. And it's to immerse ourselves in the very thing that helped us build our faith in the first place. And so it's going right back to the beginning. And like Connie said earlier, you know, remembering, being thankful. And in the times where I feel like I've been shaken, the thing that keeps me steadfast and the thing that keeps me secure is to say, okay, well, even though right now it feels like God's being silent and he doesn't seem to be here, or he doesn't seem to be where I want him to be, I know that he is, because that's his track record. And no matter how difficult this is right now for me, I know I'm going to get through, because God has been with me in all of the times before, and he's going to get me through this one as well. And so sometimes when our challenges and our difficulties and the trials we face, when they actually challenge our faith in God, it's going back and allowing yourself to say, what caused me to believe in the first place? You know, and for me, this is one thing that no one can ever take from me. is my faith, because, I was literally at the point in my life where if it wasn't for God, I would not be here today. I was so hopeless and so desperate, and I was done with life, and it was literally going to be my last day on earth, but God came through for me. And that's my foundational point. And so no matter what happens in my life, no matter what trials I'm facing, no matter how shaken I feel, I go back to that moment. In my lowest time in my life, God was there. He came through. And every time since then, he's always come through. And maybe he hasn't come through the way I would have liked. And maybe it wasn't the outcome I had hoped for. But when I can look back in gratitude, I can see that, you know what, he was there, he was faithful, and he did something in a lot of cases way better than I could have ever imagined. And so having that foundation and having something to go back to and remind ourselves where the core of our faith began. And I just really wanted to communicate that in this situation, because a lot of times when we're in these trials, our faith will be tested, and we will have to find that place of safety. Another thing I wanted to share was, no matter how dark or deep or desperate your situation is right now, I want you to know there is reason for you to hope. And like Connie said earlier, she said, if it's not good, then it's not done. And I agree with that 100%. But I want to take it another level. If you're still breathing, that means there's still purpose for your life. And so as long as you're still breathing, it's no time to give up. And so I want to encourage you that your life still has purpose. And just because you're in a difficult time right now, that's not the end of your story. You're just in the middle of your story. And so as you continue to persevere, you're going to find out, like Connie also said, that you are so much stronger than you know. And you will find the resilience within yourself that you didn't even know was there. And so I hope that, as Connie and I are sharing today, that you're seeing the fact that, yes, we all face trials. We all encounter challenges, but God has given us a reason to hope. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. And he promises to not only bring us through these trials, but also to change them into something better. So Romans 5:3-5. We can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance, and endurance develops strength of character. And character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. And this hope will not lead to disappointment, for we know how dearly God loves us, because he has given us the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with his love. And I know that for myself, like sometimes people can question, well, how can you have joy in the middle of trials, right? And it's not that we necessarily enjoy the trial, but I also know from my experience that an outcome from whatever trial I'm going to go through is that I'm going to become stronger. I'm going to become wiser. I'm going to build character. And so even though it's challenging right now, I always try to look at, well, what is this going to develop within me? Mm-hmm. Right. And so even sometimes when I'm in a challenging time, I'll even say to myself, like, this is so hard, but I know that God's going to allow this to impact someone else's life for the good. Right. And that encourages me to know that God's not going to waste what we're going through. And the testimony that I have coming through some of the trials and the circumstances that I've come through have been an incredible encouragement to others to also persevere. And so that is one of those, gifts or treasures that God has given us as we process through these trials. And I also love the second part where he says that not only does it develop strength and character in us, but also a confident hope in our salvation, right? And that comes back to the faith element, you know. And like I said, my base point is when God saved my life from literal death. And, you know, so we have this promise from God that no matter what happens in this life, we can be sure of his salvation. And that should bring us hope. And that should bring us something to look forward to. So what are some key, you know, things that happen, or, you know, how do people become resilient? How do we like practically walk this out? And so, you know, one word that, you know, readily comes back to mind is like, you know, you bounce back from your trials. And a visual image that came to mind instantly was obviously the ones I had as a kid. I think it was like a clown, actually, but it was similar to these penguins here. And I don't know if any of you know what these are, but they're like a blow up toy. And at the bottom, you either put sand or water. And what you do is they're like a toy that you can box with or play with. But every time you hit it, it falls down, but it always comes back up. And so I wanted to share this picture today just as a visual image of what resilience looks like, right? So resilience can be seen as your ability to bounce back. You know, when bad things happen, it's your ability to get from crisis mode back to your regular self. You know, you're gonna get knocked down. You're gonna have difficulties. You're gonna have periods and seasons where, you know, you're really having a difficult time. But resilience is your ability to then recenter yourself and come back to that starting point. And it takes getting back up again when you're knocked down and not letting the troubles in life to get you down and keep you there. Another phrase that comes to mind when I think of resilience is get back up. And this woman in this image, you know, she's been in a race. She's tired, she's weary, and she's, you know, face planted in the mud. And it's just like, you know, all of her competitors have passed her, and there's no chance of her winning the race. But she has a choice to make here. She can either stay where she is or she can get back up. And resilience is that decision to get back up no matter how many times you fail, no matter how many times you fall. You choose not to stay where you are, and you get up and you keep moving forward. Micah 7:7-8. As for me, I look to the Lord for help. I wait confidently for God to save me, and my God will certainly hear me. Do not gloat over me, my enemies, for though I fall, I will rise again. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. I share this scripture because, like Connie said earlier, you know, God will not force himself on us, but he is waiting expectantly for you to call on his name. And for years as a youth, I ignored God. I knew he was there, but I never asked for his help. And it wasn't until that moment of my desperation where I called out to God, and the prayer I actually prayed was, God, if you don't do something in my life today, this will be my last day to live. And I prayed it a couple times, and God came through for me that day. And so, you know, no matter what you're going through, ask the Lord for help. Call out for him. Be courageous enough to, you know, go to him with your problems, and be confident that he's going to answer you. He's going to hear you. So I want to go over, we've gone over what some mindsets are of those who, you know, don't operate in resilience, but I want to go over, well, what are resilience mindsets? How can we develop mindsets that are going to create resilience in us? And I really love this picture because oftentimes when we have difficulty overcoming, our thought process is, well, it's just impossible. Like we see the impossibility in our circumstance. We see the impossibility in what's happening in our life. I'll never overcome. Like those are the things, those are the thoughts that we have. And so I really love this picture of this guy literally kicking the I and the M off this cliff. And the only thing that's left is the word possible. And this is a good representation or picture of what I believe resilience is. It's literally taking, and I think this is also paralleled with scripture because it says, with God, all things are possible, right? But when we try to do things in our own strength, it's kind of impossible, right? And so to kind of take ourselves out of the picture, right? The letters that are falling down are the words I'm, right? I'm not the one who's responsible for fixing what's happening in my life, right? And in a lot of cases, we have no control over the things that are happening in our life. It really comes down to trusting God. It comes down to, pushing through. But at the end of the day, in a lot of cases, like there's nothing physically that I can do to change the outcome. So to take yourself out of the equation and to place your trust in God, all things become possible. And so I just love this picture. So anyways, going back to resilience mindsets. Resilience mindsets, it really comes down to a choice and to a belief. What you think, that's going to become your reality. And the Bible even says that. So a man thinks, so he will be. Right? What you allow your mind to meditate on, those are the things that are going to manifest in your life. And so if you are, thinking these mindsets that are going to hold you back, you're not going to operate in resilience. You're not going to overcome. And so I think it's really important that we recognize the fact that not only does resilience come down to a choice, but what are you speaking to yourself? What are you allowing yourself to believe and think about your current circumstance? Because it makes a difference. Resilience mindsets will help you choose to overcome even in the most difficult circumstances. So what are some resilience mindsets? And I'm going to go over a few here. And these are ones that I often have to tell myself. No matter how many times I fail, I will get up again. This one I tell myself often because, I'm actually a pretty brave person. I actually, like to try many different things, which means I usually fail a lot. And so I have to actually train myself to be like, okay, it doesn't matter how many times this doesn't work. I'm going to get back up again. No matter how many times I fail, I will try again. Another one is no matter what comes my way, I will not let it take me down. This mindset, I've had to operate in a lot. And one story actually comes to mind that I want to share. And a few years back, well, it was 9 years ago, we decided to buy an acreage. And a few years into us living here, my husband said, I want to become a farmer. And I was thinking, what? I know nothing about farming. And it wasn't until all of a sudden our chickens arrived in the mail that I was like, oh my goodness, I got to figure out how to be a farmer. And so, I started learning about how to raise chickens, and then the turkeys came, and then he got some llamas and sheep, and our farm just started to grow. At this time, we also had rabbits too. So we had converted our old garage into a barn. We had built greenhouses around it. We were growing plants for our landscape company. Everything was going amazingly well. Everything was prospering and just flourishing. And this one night, it was May 16th, 2017, and we were awoken just before midnight to a lady that I know who was living on our property at the time, came into our house yelling, fire, fire, fire. And we all woke up and we ran outside to find the entire barn and greenhouse structure engulfed in flames. And literally, it burnt to the ground. And what a devastating thing to just stand there and have no control over it, and just to see like something that was a huge part of our livelihood just completely be destroyed in one night. And I remember the next day my son actually saying to me and my husband, he said, "Mom, why do we even try? Everything we do fails." Right? And I understood his mindset. I understood what he was thinking. You know, we had tried many things and it seemed like, you know, we always came across obstacles or difficulties or something bad would happen. And even I think a month after that, my son and the son that was asking about this and my husband were in a head-on collision and our truck was completely totaled. And so sometimes in life, you can have a moment where you're like, why do I even try? Like, why am I even trying? Everything I do fails. And it can be so tempting to stay there. But if you can get that mindset that no matter what comes your way, you're not going to let it stop you. And so that's what the mindset we took as a family in this situation. We were like, you know what? The enemy wanted to take us out. Oh, and one more thing about that story, which I was reminded about today because I was reading one of my old blog posts, was about the fact that we actually had a storm coming in that day and the winds were supposed to be going southeast, which if the winds were going that way, not only would that fire have taken out the entire barn and the greenhouse structure, it would also have taken out our whole house. But as the storm was coming this way, a wind was blowing that way. And so I know in my heart that God was protecting our home from this fire, because there's no way the wind should have been blowing westerly because the storm was coming southeasterly. And so even in that one detail, I look at that and I'm like, God, you were so faithful. You know, yes, you didn't save our barn, but you saved our home. And out of that came something so much greater, because we had really just made this barn out of what we had. You know, it was not anything pretty. It wasn't anything that we really wanted. And so when we pushed past, when we cleaned up all the debris, and after insurance had come in and examined everything and we got our settlement, we had enough money to not only pay down some debt, but to build a whole brand new barn. And this time we were able to build it, you know, the way we wanted it. We were able to build it better. And even my husband, he ended up building a writer's studio for me in this upper floor. And so sometimes when we're in our moment, like it feels like my son said, why do we even try? Why, like, what's the point? But when we push through and when we look at it from a perspective, I'm not going to let this stop me. God always provides a way to make the situation better than what it was. Another resilience mindset is every perceived setback is a set up for something new or better. And this is actually a good perspective to have in regards to jobs. And I know a lot of people right now who are having difficulties finding jobs or have lost jobs, have been laid off. And I encourage people in that situation, you know, trust in the Lord. You know what? Maybe for whatever reason, your time at that place has come to an end, but that doesn't mean your time in the workforce has come to an end. God has something new for you. God has something better for you. And allow yourself to hope. Allow yourself to look with optimism that, you know, even though this one door closed, God's going to open a new one for you, because that kind of mindset is going to help you propel you forward and not keep you stuck where you are. Another mindset is if something doesn't work, I'll try it another way. And I'm thankful for this mindset in a lot of ways, because that is the mindset of the inventors of our past. You know, most of the things that we have today, we wouldn't have if these brilliant minds didn't persevere, if they didn't, you know, when one way of doing something didn't work, they didn't try it another way, you know? Another thing you can tell yourself is, I have what it takes. Even if in that moment it didn't work out, remind yourself that you do have what it takes. You know, if you need to learn new skills, you can learn new skills. If you need to do something else, you'll do that, but you have what it takes. Tell yourself, I will not give up. And last but not least, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So every week we like to do an activation. And today I wanted us to choose to not give up. I want us to, consider for one moment that resilience really comes down to a choice. And that we all are resilient. We all have that hardwired into us. But what it comes down to is, what are we going to choose in the nit and gritty of our life, in those moments where we're faced with these trials? What are we going to choose? Are we going to choose to give up? Or are we going to choose to persevere? Are we going to choose to, just allow these circumstances to overcome us? Or are we going to find our way through? And so these are three of the questions, or three of the things I want you to think about in our next 5-6 minutes, as we just reflect on, what Connie and I have shared today. I want you to reflect on your current circumstances. Are you feeling overwhelmed and like you want to quit? And what areas do you feel this way? And just jot them down. And you are never meant to do this journey alone. And I want you to reflect on who you can share with what you're going through that can help support you in your areas of struggle and hold you up when you're at your weakest. And like Connie said a few weeks back, when she was in a low point, she reached out to me, and it made all the difference. So who in your life is someone that you can trust, someone that you can call on, and really, in whatever it is that you're going through, can pray with you, can maybe give you a new perspective, can maybe speak hope, maybe even share God's heart through prophecy for you that will spur you on to hope for something greater in your life. I want you to think about who that person could be. And maybe it's multiple people. And, sometimes for different issues, I talk to different people, because I have different kinds of people in my life that will be able to support me in better ways for different issues that I'm facing. And so maybe God will highlight a couple different people that, depending on what you're going through, you can reach out to. And then I want you to think about ways that you can trust God more in your current circumstance. And do you believe that He cares and is going to help you overcome this circumstance?
The three keys that we want to remember from tonight, or we want to highlight from tonight, is that number one, God has designed within all of us the ability to be resilient. And you can choose today to trust God in the most difficult situations to show you the way through. And number two, do not isolate yourself. When you become an island to yourself, you will have a much harder time overcoming. And number three, resilience is a choice to never give up and to overcome no matter what is going on around you. You get to choose. And this quote here is really great. It's refuse to quit. It's in quitting that you lose your ability to persevere. And I just wanted to wrap up that presentation with this scripture. James chapter 1, verses 2-4. This is from the Passion Translation. My fellow believers, when it seems as though you're facing nothing but difficulties, see it as an invaluable opportunity to experience the greatest joy that you can. For you know that when your faith is tested, it stirs up the power of endurance. And then as your endurance grows even stronger, it will release perfection into every part of your being until
there is nothing missing and nothing lacking.
So celebrating breakthroughs is going to be our webinar in August, on August 3rd, and it's going to be a little bit different than our typical webinars in the fact that we're going to be talking about what celebrating really means. Because I think sometimes we've gotten so used to the grind of life that we forget that every breakthrough deserves a celebration, because a lot of times those breakthroughs have been through the trials and the hardships and the difficulties of life that we've had to trudge through. And we need to take those times where we finally get breakthrough, and we need to celebrate those because they deserve celebrating. And so we're going to kind of flip it a little bit, and we're going to have a shorter time of sharing about what true celebration looks like, and open up a larger time where we get to share our testimonies of the things that God's been doing in our lives for the last year and a half. We've been doing these webinars, and I know that God has been doing a lot in a lot of people's lives. And so this will open up a huge opportunity for all of us to get to share the breakthroughs that we have experienced. And that'll encourage people too. Like, we're talking about how some people are still in those places of struggle. Well, hearing how other people have had these breakthroughs does encourage us that there is hope, that there is movement forward. And so we felt this was really important. And, you know, we've been at this for a year and a half, and we haven't actually set time aside to celebrate. And so we feel like we need to honor that and celebrate with you. So we feel that's going to be really exciting. So join us next month on August 3rd for that. If you are in need of a mentor, like I said in the section about community, sometimes we do need a mentor in our lives. We need someone to talk to, and like somebody who can walk us through things. Feel free to book a mentoring session, and you can actually see this on our website. And this is where you would go. So you see the book now, that's where you click, and then it will show you times that are available, and you can choose who you want to meet with. So far we have Laura and myself as mentors, and we have Walter, who is able to mentor men. So we do have it open that men would also have an option here too. And of course, me and Laura, we do this podcast. We've kind of slowed down a little bit for the summer. We're only doing it once a month. And during the rest of the year, we've been doing it about twice a month. So, but we are still doing it. And so if you want to connect with us while you're on the road, or while you're out and about, or just when you just feel like listening to us instead of watching us, you know, this is a great option for you. We're on Spotify, Anchor, Google, and I don't remember. iHeartRadio, yes. And we are trying to expand into the iWorld, the iTunes and that kind of thing. But it's taking us a bit to kind of figure that out. So we'll keep you posted on that.